Hey guys, NostalgicDan one again here, and I'm back with my handheld recommendations for the Sony PlayStation Portable. I love the PSP. I was a kind of late newcomer to the PSP, and I really enjoyed the PSP. It reminds me so much of the DS with a lot of obscure games on there, a lot of awesome JRPGs. So I love the system, so here's some of my recommended titles. First, we have a really lighthearted, quirky action kind of platformer adventure game, and that is Toto Walk by Tecmo. And Tokubo is a really fun little action platformer adventure. It has a really interesting mechanic where you're this character and you control these like little robots, and you control like several of them at once. So you use them to manipulate and solve environmental puzzles. Maybe there's a gap, like a huge gap. You can use like their formations because you give them specific formations, like to be in a line, maybe in a V shape, and you use that to battle and solve puzzles. So maybe there's like a nice gap, you send them in a line and you can kind of fling them over and you can use them as a bridge. So you can imagine that, like there's a lot of puzzle solving. It's kind of a puzzle adventure game, but really lighthearted, really fun, just a quirky little style. It's got a nice style going for it. A really quality, like, puzzle platformer game. It's got a really interesting mechanic and really lighthearted. So definitely check out Tokobo. Okay, and next we have a really awesome puzzle series to check out on the PSP. There's two of them, and it's available in multiple other places, but that is the Luminous series on the PSP. There's 1 and 2 on the PSP. There's also, I believe, one on the PlayStation 2, and you can find Luminous on like the Xbox Live Arcade, which I played that version. And Luminous is a really addicting, kind of simple puzzle game. It revolves around these little 2x2 blocks, like multicolored blocks. And you try and make, 2x2 squares of the same color or more disappear, and you can chain them. What's a really interesting feature about Luminous that really adds to, I don't know, kind of the strategy aspect of it and how to build combos is it's got this line meter that's constantly going across the screen. And like, say you make a combo, it won't disappear right away. It'll disappear once that line comes through and clears it. So you can build like really big combos and just wait for that line to come across and really use that to your advantage. So that line mechanic adds a little more depth to what could be a really simple game. The music is absolutely phenomenal, even though this one has features more like, kind of licensed music and stuff like that. The music is always a solid staple of the Luminous series. It features different modes too, like, puzzle solving modes where you gotta clear them in specific ways, or like pattern modes where you gotta build like specific patterns. So really interesting, really in-depth puzzle series. You can find these games extremely cheap too, so definitely check out the Luminous series on PSP or Xbox Live Arcade or anywhere else you can get it. Next is a really awesome, really lighthearted shoot 'em up, and that is Platypus on the PSP. This is a really simplistic, really fun shoot 'em up, and it's really interesting too because the whole game is done in claymation style, so everything in the game is made out of clay, from the ship and all that to the bullets. It's like all clay, so it's really cute. It looks really good too. I love the little like aspects of this game where, since everything's made out of clay, you'll be shooting like maybe a big spaceship and you'll see like that spaceship slowly deteriorate, like clay chunks falling off and going everywhere. It's really cool. The music is okay, nothing too fancy. The sound effects are fairly simple. But it's a nice shoot 'em up. It features like a typical shoot 'em up would, multiple upgrades that you can get. So there's different like shots. There's different like maybe missiles, spread shots, etc. You go through different levels. The levels provide nice variety, and there's usually like an end boss at the end of each stage. So typical shoot 'em up fare. It's really solid gameplay. They're really good. The only qualm I have with it is that, like, since everything's made out of clay, I wish they did a little more to differentiate, yourself in the background. Maybe there's like an aura around your ship or something, but, sometimes it could be kind of hard to see like some of the bullets and whatnot because everything looks the same, but I didn't find that too bad, and overall it's a really, really fun, really enjoyable shoot 'em up experience, and you can find it really cheap too, so a really unique shoot 'em up. Definitely check out Platypus on the PSP. And next we have a really interesting game that kind of caught me off guard, but it's actually really high quality, and that is Killzone Liberation on the PSP. It is set in the Killzone universe, but it is very different. It's not like a first-person shooter or anything. It's actually more of a top-down tactical strategy shooter. So what I mean by that is, like, it takes place like top-down, from a top-down angle, and you move around your character with the joystick and all that, and you can shoot. but it's more emphasis on like tactical strategies. You order your teammates around at specific points on the map. I want you to go here, I want you to take out this guy. You can be really specific with it, so it's more of an emphasis on teamwork and strategy and planning out your battle commands and everything. So that's a really interesting aspect. It looks good on the PSP. It has some interesting mechanics to it and some nice segments to break up the action, but a really fun kind of tactical shooter. If you're into that kind of thing, this is actually a really good one to check out. So definitely check out Killzone Liberation if that's your kind of thing. And next is a pseudo sequel to a Square Enix series called Parasite Eve, and that is the third birthday. Even though I don't consider it a sequel because it's very different, but sometimes different doesn't always mean bad. And I actually really like this game. What it is it's a kind of third-person action shooter kind of game, but kind of I get vibes of like Resident Evil because it's a little more slow-paced and a little more dramatic and a little more like kind of closed, confined corridors sometimes, but really good. Visually, the game looks fantastic on the PSP. Some of the boss fights are absolutely epic in scope. It just looks great on the PSP. You can tell this game is pushing the PSP to its limits. Really interesting mechanics. One really interesting mechanic is called like an overdive system, where as Bray you can dive into other like soldiers on the battlefield and whatnot. And that's a really interesting mechanic. So like you dive and you take control of that person wherever they're at. You take control of whatever items they're using. So it kind of adds a strategy element because sometimes that comes into play in later boss battles. But really interesting because it adds a system where like you can use it to your advantage, where say you're about to die running low on health, you can just overdive into another person and get your health back. So that is a really interesting mechanic. The game is actually really challenging. That's why I get vibes of like Resident Evil. It's really challenging. Some of the boss battles are absolutely like punishing and just unforgiving. But if you like that kind of challenge, in your third-person shooters, definitely check it out. It's got a really interesting story to it. It's got a lot of in-depth mechanics where you can customize your weapon and your weapon abilities. So it's really in-depth, really intuitive. Like I said, a great-looking game. If you're a third-person action shooter kind of fan, definitely check out the third. Next, I guess we'll dive into some more really obscure games on the PSP. This one is absolutely awesome if you're a fan of like brawlers or beat-em-ups, and that is Kaban Show Badass Rumble on the PSP, published by Atlas. What this is it's an open world beat 'em up. That's all it is. Like, it is straight up open world beat 'em up set in the Japan setting. It breaks up Japan into like different districts and all that, and each district looks pretty different from one another, so it adds nice variety in the environmental design. And just the combat system works relatively good. It's fairly simple. You can pick up weapons and stuff. You have different like crazy powers and stuff. It's just so over the top. Like, basically the premise of this game is you play as this guy right here, and he's basically trying to be the most badass guy in Japan by beating up these banchos, as they call them. And each district has their own like lead bancho. So you're going around Japan trying to take down all these badass banchos to be the #1 badass in Japan. So really interesting mechanic. And he's like in school at the time, so like that school aspect provides a nice like breakup of like the beat 'em up action. So you kind of have to balance that like school life with beating up people. Really interesting. There's some interesting mechanics. You can have different costumes, buy different weapons, buy items. Just really interesting. There's also a banana suit, which just why not? As this game is so over the top. To start fights with people, it's really odd. You shoot like laser beams out of your eyes to make contact with them, and before you fight, you have like a smash talk phase where you have to, smash talk properly in order to give yourself like that first hit, so you can have the chance to get the first hit in battle. Really interesting, really fun, really out there, just awesome open world beat 'em up. If that sounds fun to you, definitely check it out. A really odd game, but and next we have another really obscure game that I really like, even though it's got some issues, but I really enjoy it. And that is the really odd Hammering Hero on the PSP. And this is based off a long-running series, actually, which I didn't know about, called Hammering Harry. And Hammering Harry actually dates back all the way to the NES days, so this series has been around for quite a while, but obviously the majority of those stayed in Japan, so obviously us Americans wouldn't really know about the series. It's one of the more newer ports of it, a new iteration into the series. And basically what this is Hammering Hero is like a 2D kind of platformer. There's not so much emphasis on platforming, but it's more of a 2D side-scrolling beat 'em up action game, kind of, where you play as this character, like, based on the role he has. Like, he can take on different jobs, like maybe he's a sushi chef, maybe he's a carpenter. Whatever job he has reflects the weapon he'll have. So if he's a carpenter, he'll have like a hammer. It's basically broken down where you just move side-scrolling levels. You do have to dodge some stuff, and you fight people. You hit them. There's two different types of swings. There's like a horizontal swing and an over-the-head swing. You fight end bosses at the end of each stage, but it is so over the top, like in its level design, so quirky, so out there. Like, if you're a sushi chef, you can just go around hitting people with big fish and all that. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but basically the little premise that it's got going for it is that there's this evil corporation in Japan that's trying to destroy the city, basically, and he's trying to save everyone. And every now and then in the levels you come across people who need help, like they need something specific done, like, so you can try and help them. It's really interesting, and it's just broken up into levels, and you play through the levels. You do get items that you can use for healing and different abilities, but just so over the top. The level design is really nice. It's just ridiculous at points. It does have issues. It does suffer from, like, every now and then there'll be some control input, like delay, which will kind of throw you off, and the game is actually really, really slow, so you gotta go into that expecting that. Don't expect some like fast-paced, like kind of just action game. It's really slow. Like, the character moves really, really sluggish, and it's just kind of slow-paced. And so that'll be some getting used to for some people, because that's kind of different, but I didn't mind that. Like, with all its little faults that it has, overall I thought it was a very, very enjoyable little, you know, kind of unique experience on the PSP. If you like kind of action beat-em-ups, if you like the, you know, gameplay you're seeing, then definitely check it out. Hammer Hero's a interesting little. And next we will delve into my personal favorite genre, JRPGs, RPGs. I love them. I have a bunch on the PSP, and I still have quite a few RPGs I need to play on the PSP, but these are some of the great ones that I played so far. First one, a must-have if you're an SRPG fan, and that is Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together, part of the Tactics Ogre series, or the Ogre Battle series, which dates back pretty far to like the 16-bit era. Really, really high quality SRPG by Square Enix. Musical score, absolutely phenomenal. The presentation looks absolutely gorgeous on the PSP. And just like a typical SRPG, it's a grid-based system, so you move around on the grid. You have different classes. A really unique feature is that, like, your party levels up, your specific characters level up, but the classes themselves actually level up. So like the archer ability will level up to like 4, and those abilities that they get from that level up will be universal to any, like, you know, future like members of the party for that class. So really unique, really in depth, got a good story going for it. It's just a really high quality SRPG. If you're an SRPG fan, definitely check out Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together on the PSP. And next is absolutely masterful action RPG on the PSP, and that is Ys the Elphaba Fergana for the PSP. There's also Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles and Ys 7 on the PSP. This is a remake of Ys 3 Wanders from Ys, which is on graphics, TurboGrafx, and Super Nintendo. And I actually have the Super Nintendo one, which is interesting. And they stay really, really like true to like the original, like what it's based off of. But it's changed where it's more of, you know, this takes place as an action RPG, and it's more like top-down. So you roam around in these 3D environments and attack enemies. Really awesome. The combat is absolutely awesome. Just the combat is executed really well. You can do different combos, different magical abilities you can get. You go to towns, and like there's a couple of towns, and you just battle in these dungeons. And usually these dungeons have these like really, really challenging like end bosses. Some of the end bosses are absolutely punishing, almost in an old school sense, where some of these end bosses you really have to like memorize patterns, because some of them have really specific patterns that you got to get down. But it's a short-lived game. It's about maybe, it only took me like 15 hours to beat, so, and that kind of reflects that it is based off like an old school RPG, and granted old school RPGs weren't that long back in the day, but really high quality. Musical score absolutely phenomenal, presentation is absolutely gorgeous, nice variety in the level design, just a fantastic, simple, fantastic story in Ys the Elphaba Fergana. And if you're a PC fan, you can also find Ys the Elphaba Fergana now on Steam, of all places. It finally got ported to Steam, so XE plans on releasing future titles on Steam, so it's also available on there, just so you know. So definitely check it out. I'm pretty sure you can get the premium edition too, which comes with the soundtrack and art calendars, so I'm pretty sure you can find this relatively cheap. So definitely check out Eve. Next we have an absolutely masterful JRPG on the PSP that is just a grand epic adventure to be had, and that is The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, part of the long-running Legend of Heroes series. And basically this is a very, very long game. It'll take you around 50 hours to beat. It's one of the longest games on the PSP. But it basically revolves around Estelle and Josh, who are basically trying to become bracers, which bracers are like the ultimate like kind of adventurer. So like you go around and you take up quests, like you take up requests from the Adventurers Guild, and that improves your bracer rank, so you can become a bracer and start to reap the rewards of being a bracer. So it's an absolutely grand adventure. It has a really good story going for it. It basically takes place where, like, typical RPG, you go to overworld and then you have towns and you go into dungeons, stuff like that, fight bosses. And the battle system is, for the most part, a turn-based battle system with some very, very light SRPG mechanics into it, where you can move around on a grid-based system, because every now and then you'll fight a battle where sometimes you need to move, but for the majority of it, it's pretty straightforward turn-based battle system with some nice little features in there. The characters are absolutely extremely likable. They're lovable, honestly. The interactions between these characters are absolutely phenomenal. There's some hilarious dialogue to pick up some of the more tense moments in the game. And there's a lot of humor and just character in this game, like even with the treasure chest, where like if you get an item from a treasure chest, you'll get it and then you can interact with the treasure chest again, and it'll always have this witty one-liner to say, like, believe it or not, you took the item from this treasure chest. So like that just kind of shows the character of this game. Really awesome, really high quality game. Hope to see some of the second chapter come out eventually. I would love to see that, but definitely check out The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky if you want a really grand adventure on the PSP. And you can also find it in this nice premium edition, which features a poster, a little like Bracers badge, and the soundtrack CD, which the soundtrack to this game is absolutely phenomenal. So definitely check out Legend of Heroes. And next we have a really awesome JRPG that is really clear that it takes heavy inspiration from the Persona series, and that is Fate Extra on the PSP. It's a really awesome dungeon crawler RPG, and it's really clear it takes inspiration from Persona, but it takes place in the Fate universe, which I admit I'm not even well versed in that at all, but you don't need to know like the Fate universe. It explains it really well in this game. So basically what this is it's a interesting thing where it basically revolves around this tournament, and this like grand tournament, and it's basically survival of the fittest, because every week you fight these tournament battles and basically the loser dies, so it's basically survival of the fittest. It's really interesting where like you're a master and you don't necessarily fight yourself, your servant does the fighting for you, so I think that's really interesting. But during the week you have to meet certain requirements in order to fight the like tournament battles. At the end of the week you have to find certain like items before you can fight. So what that comes down to is like it's broken up into like kind of day-night segments, almost like Persona, where like it's set in the high school setting where you interact with people and whatnot, and then during nighttime you go dungeon crawling in these dungeons. So you fight random encounter monsters and you can level grind or do whatever you need, but you need to go in the dungeons in order to find the items you need to fight the weekly tournament battles. So it's really interesting. The battle system is really unique in the sense that it's almost like a rock paper scissors kind of battle system, where there's 3 specific like actions you can take, and every action is weak against one but really effective against another. But that sounds kind of odd, but as you fight enemies more, you start to pick up intel, as they call it, on enemies. You find intel, and you start to be able to predict their moves. And once you can predict their moves, they'll start to display what the enemy's going to do. So it makes some of those battles a lot more quicker as you go along. So just a really interesting game. It looks really gorgeous on the PSP. Just a unique game. If you're a fan of dungeon crawlers, it's definitely a high quality one. So definitely check out Fate Extra, which comes in a limited edition as well with the art book and soundtrack CD. So definitely check out. And lastly, speaking of Persona, I definitely have to recommend Shin Megami Tensei Persona 2 Innocent Sin on the PSP. Now, these are part of the older Persona games, which some people don't like, and I love these games still. Like, I love the newer Personas, but I love the old school ones where basically these are more, and Persona 1 is on the PSP as well, and these are more like dungeon crawlers where it's really old school. It feels like a PlayStation 1 game, which I like, but it takes place where, you know, you progress the story and you go to these certain environments and they're basically like dungeons. You fight monsters. The battle system is really unique in here where it's like turn-based, but it has this really interesting feature where you can interact with the enemies and actually talk to them and just engage with the monsters. And if you, there's like different status elements where like if you can make them like scared, you can make them happy, and so you get certain bonuses from them. That's how you get some of the persona cards which you need to make personas, or you can make like packs with them so they won't attack you. And it's really obscure, really odd, but I find that really interesting. It adds something more to the battle system. I think the presentation is absolutely phenomenal. The musical score is really good. I find the characters in this very likable. They're all really interesting. It just has a lot of humor to it, which Persona games tend to have. And it revolves around this. The story revolves around this mysterious Joker who's, you know, kind of plaguing the town. And there's this like odd Joker game going around where people's wishes come true. It's really obscure, but definitely worth looking into. Yeah, granted it's a little more old school, but I love it still. I really love it still. So I think it's absolutely interesting. I think the story is interesting. The presentation is interesting. I find it really unique. So definitely check out Shibagami Tensei Persona 2 Innocent Sin. And this is actually a second part to the Persona 2, which on the PlayStation 1 there's Eternal Punishment, which is actually really rare, but Atlas has already said that they're planning on localizing that to the States. They're already under development for getting it to the PSP, so definitely check it out. If you can find this nice collector set, you get a nice little mini soundtrack, as they call it, with 10 songs, so definitely worth checking out Persona 2 Innocence. And if you're a fan of like old school dungeon crawler RPGs, just really. And that wraps up my handheld recommendations for the PSP. And I like to stress this every time. I have a lot of games in my backlog, so I can't play everything, and I have a lot of awesome games I need to play. So definitely thank you for watching. Thank you for making it through. I hope this video helps you maybe pique your interest on a couple of games you haven't heard of. But anyways, I'd like to thank you for watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, guys.